He would have never crossed that border, in my opinion, if we would have left our troops there. And President Biden knew that. All his advisors know that. But they chose to do it anyway. And it created a situation where now we have over 1 million people dead. You talked about world wars. I believe this is a World War III in a different sense. By proxy, they have 30 nations in Ukraine right now. China, Russia, Ukraine, America, Iran, North Korea, all participating in this one war. That's by proxy. That is a world war happening right now. It's not the threat of one, it is one.
Well, welcome to Culture and Christianity, where we talk about how our faith impacts our culture and the opposite of that, how our culture is impacting our faith, because both of those things are happening. And it requires some wisdom, I think, on behalf of the people of God, that in some ways that perhaps we didn't need it a few years ago, but it's an important time for the church to be the church. I have some guests today that I'm really excited to get to talk to.
Yeah.
Chad and Hunter Robichaux. Welcome back to Tennessee.
Thank you. Yeah, I love being here. Love being here. Love this church. Love you.
Oh, man, your family.
Yeah, exactly.
Hunter, have you been here before?
This is my first time. First time to Tennessee, actually.
Oh, we'll have to teach you how to say y'all.
Yeah. Yeah, we say that in Texas.
Okay, that's right. Tennessee and Texas have been working together for a long time.
Yeah, we've been friends for a while.
We sure have.
It's two of the last strongholds.
Here we go. Let's pray we change that and it becomes contagious to the rest of the country. But there's so much going on I want to talk to you about. In the world, and I don't know, there's a lot of voices, and I think some of them are credible that we're on the cusp of some global conflicts if we don't walk it back. But we'll hold some of that for maybe a little later. Yeah. You have a new book. It's going to release August the 13th. It's with Thomas Nelson, but it's called A Mission Without Borders: Why a Father and Son Risk It All for the People of Ukraine.
Yes. Yeah.
So we want to start out talking about that a little bit. Hunter, I want to get you in here early because I know him. If we won't get him stopped if we get him started talking.
Yeah.
You set the stage with your experience in Ukraine. I mean, what that had to be like, and why you thought it was important enough that you'd be there in the middle of that.
Yeah, well, I'm still actively involved in doing ministry in Ukraine, and it's still an ongoing thing. This book is really kind of what it was like at the beginning of us starting to do ministry in Ukraine. Ever since I was a little kid, I've always felt like I needed to do something that was bigger than myself. And when I went into the Marine Corps, I went into Bible college. And while in Bible college, I felt really pulled towards international ministry. I didn't know that my version of doing international ministry would be going into a war-torn country and bringing the gospel to these people that were just broken. And so, God placed me in Bible college to learn how to do ministry, and then threw me to the wolves in Ukraine to do ministry in some of the most harsh places in the world.
That's not throwing you to the wolves. It's throwing you to the people.
Yeah.
Evil is the wolves.
Yep.
Yeah.
But when you go to help God's people, evil shows up.
That's right.
You don't game plan for people or issues that aren't a threat. And I've come to the conclusion that if you pose a threat to the purposes of darkness, then you get opposition.
That's right.
If you don't get any opposition, you're not much of a threat.
Yeah.
So it's almost a compliment. Yeah. It really is.
Yeah.
It's like, if you're on a team and you're the weakest player on the team, nobody game plans for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you're the most disruptive player on that team to an adversary, then everybody game plans for you. So congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
You got game planned. That's impressive. Well, Chad, I know it's got to be different taking a son into a place where you're a Force Recon Marine, 6 deployments in Afghanistan. I get my language wrong in the military sometimes.
You get Force Recon right. I did 8 deployments. I was on a JSOC task force into Afghanistan, and never thought I'd go back. But as you know, I talked about it here at this church. Went back for the Afghan evacs, and we got my interpreter Aziz, and who'd been here, and got 17,000 people out. And
17,000.
Yeah, we got 17,000 people out
because there were only 5 or 6 left when the Americans withdrew. I heard the State Department. So.
Yeah, the State Department did such a great job that
their math was a little off.
Yeah, it was off. They said, well, the White House said that they had 16,000 Americans there, which that's not accurate. There was probably more. But then they said they got 6,000 out, and then they said they had 100 left, which I'm not that great at math, but
it's algebra.
Yeah, that's going to be algebra. Washington D.C. algebra. But yeah, they left thousands of Americans behind. They left our interpreters behind. They left the nation behind, and they left the world vulnerable. And so that we went there and did what we could to help, and we were able to help a lot of people. And but that was Afghanistan, and then on the end of that, Ukraine kicked off, and I tie the two together, by the way, because Ukraine would have never happened had it not been for the withdrawal of Afghanistan.
Why is that? I think I know, but
yeah, well, I mean, when the White House has a weak leader, and the world's a dangerous place. And people could take that partisan or whatever, but it's just the truth. If you have a weak leader in the world leading position, which is the president of the United States, if you have a weak leader there, the world is going to be dangerous. And when the world saw how Afghanistan was handled, all the bad guys come up, and it's our time. I mean, they took Putin took Crimea during the Obama-Biden years. Putin didn't do anything for President Trump's 4 years, and then he's out of office. He does this withdrawal of Afghanistan. He puts 100,000 troops on the border, on the eastern border of Ukraine, flexes, and President Biden removed our troops from Ukraine, closed our embassy, and the rest of the world followed, because that's what the rest of the world does. And so now all the NATO nations pull out of Ukraine. And that gives a green light for Putin to cross over into that. And a lot of people could say, well, there was only had 160 troops there, even one troop, because the Article 5 violation for NATO is what the threat is. It's not how many troops we're going to fight. It's not 100,000 troops versus 160 troops. It's the fact that if Putin indiscriminately, even accidentally, wounds a NATO service member, that's an Article 5 violation. He knows the repercussions of that. He's evil. He's a bad dude, but he's not stupid. And so he would have never crossed that border, in my opinion, if we would have left our troops there. And President Biden knew that. All his advisors know that. But they chose to do it anyway. And it created a situation where now we have over 1 million people dead. You talked about world wars. I believe this is a World War III in a different sense. By proxy, they have 30 nations in Ukraine right now. China, Russia, Ukraine, America, Iran, North Korea, all participating in this one war. That's by proxy. That is a world war happening right now. It's not the threat of one; it is one, and it's a brewing pot to blow into something even worse. But I mean, if you look at Ukraine, about probably approximately, the numbers are very skewed. I would say over 1 million people have been killed, and I've gotten a lot of pushback by the church. Unfortunately, a lot of people have written me like, "Why are you helping in Ukraine? Zelensky's corrupt, and we're sending hundreds of billions of dollars of our taxpayer dollars there." And by the way, I don't agree with sending our taxpayer dollars there, because firsthand, Hunter and I have seen it doesn't make it to the front lines. But I do believe Hunter might not like me saying this because he still has to go there. But I do believe President Zelensky is corrupt. I believe that politicians all over the world through history have been corrupt, including in our own White House. Like, if you don't believe politicians are corrupt, you're surprised by that, you should probably read a history book, right? But I'm not going there for President Biden or President Zelensky. We're going there for people. And as Christians, if we ever let our compassion for people get jaded by politics, we should probably change our politics, right? There's innocent people there that are the victims of this, and those people do need help. And if God's given us the ability to go help, and we have the ability to help, then we should. And that's why we went to Ukraine.
Well, the line I hear all the time is that Christians shouldn't be involved in politics.
Yeah.
And that's a backwards approach. It's not about advocating for candidates or for parties. Mm-hmm. But if Christians aren't involved in the discussions that are political, we're abandoning the leadership of our world to the secular authorities. Wars are political events, mm-hmm. and we better have a God perspective on those conflicts, or we're abandoning the weakest people amongst us to the wolves of the world.
Yeah. If communities, all the stuff that's going on in the war right now, understand the Ukrainian war, the gender politics, right? The mutilation of children and the sexual indoctrination of children. If people in communities can't come to their church for truth, then where do they go to? If the pastor that had the moral courage to stand on that pulpit and tell the truth and give their biblical worldview, then where they're going to go to CNN or Fox News? This is where they should come to the truth. And when I say this, the church, pastors, and although that's one of the reasons I've just really grown such admiration and respect for you personally, and have been talking about you everywhere I go, because unfortunately you're one of the few pastors that are standing up there with the moral courage to speak truth, and I think God's blessed you for it, and you've drawn together just an amazing community because of it, and so
it's amazing how God honors you. Brings a fruitfulness to your life if you do what he told you to do.
Yeah, it's simple, right? It's crazy because a lot of pastors have cowered down out of the fear that they're going to lose members. They're like, well, we don't get it political here because we're going to lose members of our congregation. The opposite happens. You speak truth and you be bold. Maybe you lose some, and probably didn't need them there anyway. But but people come because they want to hear truth. People want to hear truth. people want to be led, and people want to be led by people with moral courage.
And I'll take just a minute. If you're part of listening to the podcast and you're in a place where you don't have the spiritual leadership you would like, you use your voice in the place where God's given you that influence.
That's right.
The place I bump into this more frequently is when I talk to families, and sometimes the wife will say, my husband isn't born again, or he's not a believer, he's not the spiritual leader in my home. I'm going, okay, duly noted. Now you go lead with the voice God's given you, with the influence you have. We can't surrender the opportunities around us because circumstances aren't perfect. And I think that's true for the Christian community. I wish churches were more willing to be engaged in our culture on the issues that are shaping our future. But absent that, the business people, the butchers, the bakers, and the candlestick makers need to go use their voice and their influence.
Absolutely, yeah.
I promise. Charlie Daniels said, a politician wants another vote. Politicians chase votes. That's what they do. That's the nature of the beast. And if we will become the people with a worldview, and there's enough of us, the politicians will come court a godly perspective to lead with, because they just want the power that comes with being elected. That's kind of a jaded view of politics, but I think it's accurate.
And unfortunately, it's very accurate.
So your book is about your journey through Ukraine, and how many times have you been there?
I've been there 10. Hunter's been there 13 now.
Is that all?
I think there might be some more. I'd have to look at my
Mighty Oaks as a ministry, we've been there continuous, but about 30 trips. But we've been there continuous since the week before. We had this guy Seaspray, who I talk about a lot in the book. He's one of my primary partners in this. He was there a week ahead of time. I went right after the invasion. And the book, what the book's really about is us going there because God burdened our hearts to go there. We went there originally to rescue Americans left behind. We talk about several big rescue operations, like the rescue of Benjamin Hall, the Fox News reporter, that a lot of people know about Benjamin Hall being catastrophically wounded and his team being killed, and us rescuing him, recovering his body. But what the book is really about more than anything else is me as a father and my relationship with my son in the war zone, because I think a lot of people that are parents can relate to this. We have a fear over our kids when they get their driver's license. You're just waiting for the police officer to come to the door and say, your son got in a car accident or something like that. And that carries, now my son joins the Marine Corps and he goes to Afghanistan. He deploys to Afghanistan in combat. And he sees kinetic combat in Afghanistan. And so the Afghanistan withdrawal, that operation happened. He wanted to participate in that. And me not really putting him in Afghanistan, but he played a very crucial role and did an important role in that. And then we go into Ukraine. He wants to come, and there came a point to where he was really helping out in Poland and doing such a great job. But to take him across that border into a war as a father is a decision I felt was something I couldn't do. Like, if I have to be a good leader and put the best people on the team, but I have a lot of other people I could use. And he's very effective in Poland. But to bring my son into not just a war zone, but past the Russian lines, where people was kinetic fighting happened, where thousands of people are dying every day. That felt irresponsible as a father. So I was letting my fear and my control determine that decision. And so the book is a journey of me going to the relinquishment of that fear and control to a trust in God and my son, and a realization that as much as I love God, as much as I love Hunter, God loves him more. Right? As much as I can protect Hunter, God can protect him more. And as much as I want to control Hunter, there's probably no safer place for him to be, whether on a couch in Texas or in the middle of a war zone in Ukraine. There's probably no safer place for him to be in the middle of God's will. And I really realized that God was burdening his heart just as was mine to go help those people. And so the relinquishment of that, and I learned so much from it. So when I wanted to write this book, when I wanted to catalog all the stuff that happened in Ukraine so people would know from first person on the ground view of what happened in Ukraine, but I could not hold back sharing a story of what I discovered. And that was the biggest lesson for me was the relinquishment of that fear. Now that's still there because he just bought a motorcycle, and I'm not happy about that.
He doesn't like that one.
So he thinks that relates to this. It's not a cop out. The motorcycle's a bad idea.
There's not a volume 2 about motorcycles.
No, it could be a side note about it.
So Hunter, what's it like when he's not just your dad, he's your CO? That's a whole nother layer.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting having your dad as your boss, but then having your dad as a boss when you're in a combat zone, because it's not like it's really hard to explain, honestly, because you're talking about life and death situations. You make a wrong decision, you make the wrong step, you die. It's
or somebody else does,
or somebody else does, right? Because every decision you make either affects you or someone else on your team. So yeah, I mean, just this whole experience going into Ukraine with him, being able to see my dad's faith in God overcome his fear, but also God giving me the understanding of having patience was the biggest thing for me. Like, I know God was working on my dad's heart, but God was also working on my heart at the same time.
Well, I heard something on the radio today, honestly. Training camps opened for the Titans of the NFL team in Nashville. And one of the players was talking, and he said his favorite day was family day when the families got to come to practice. And he said they always make family day a day when there's heavy contact. Because he said they know there'd be fights and things break out, but with our families there, we're more likely to behave. But he said, I'm so proud that my kids get to see me do what I do.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine what that would be like in the context of going into a war zone for both of you. I mean, that's got to be.
Well, I mean, the prologue of the book, I'll start the book off with telling the story. I'm with, we were actually going all this operation together. And by the way, like, for those like, oh, you know, he brought his son along. The people that are part of our team there are like tier 1 special operations guys, like SEAL Team 6, Delta Force, CIA Ground Branch, like very high level guys. That's the kind of guys I typically have in my teams when I do this. And so they're the ones that were pushing, like, Hunter's crushing it. He built the Tactical Operations Center. He put our comms package together. Like, we need him. Like, and so they're pushing me, like, these guys. So it wasn't like a nepotism thing of dragging my son in this. It was like, he's over there earning it and crushing it. And these guys are starting to respect him and want him as part of the team. So I was getting pressure from all the sides. But, you know, going into that environment with is just it's a crazy moment. And like I said, in the prologue of the book, I start off, we're going to this operation, and he's going to be leading the team. And there's, like I said, there's tier 1 special operations guys. He's going to be leading the team, and I'm going to be overseeing it. And right before we're about to leave, which we were leaving the next morning, me and Seaspray get a call that this U.S. Marine that was volunteering with the Ukrainians had got shot in the stomach and captured by the Russians. And we had the ability to go get him. And so I had to make a decision to go with Seaspray and leave him behind. And so now he's going to go to a different city. I'm going to go to this place we're going to try to rescue this Marine. And so Seaspray and I leave. We drive through the night. We get to this town called Izum. And in Izum had been occupied by the Russians for 6 months. And the Ukrainians had just retook it. And we were also asked by our government, by the SOLO, Special Operations Liaison Officer of the CIA, if we could identify these mass graves that the Ukrainians were claiming. There was mass graves of 1,400 women and little kids, which, by the way, we did identify that. While we were there, the Russians collapse the border around us, and they start trying to retake the territory. MiG fighter jets are flying over, dropping bombs. Like, I've never had that experience before. Seaspray hadn't either. Like, in Afghanistan, we own the air, right? So now you got Russian fighter jets dropping bombs on Ukrainian troops. You got artillery coming in. The indirect fire got so close, probably within 100 yards of us, that dirt was flying on us. The Ukrainians that were fighting their way back through, I could hear the buffer springs. Like, this was very kinetic combat. I'd stopped, as we were moving forward, I'd stopped counting, and I videoed some of it. I stopped counting about 80 dead Russian troops as we were passing. That was like extremely kinetic combat. I get on the radio to call him to let him know what's going on. And he says, is that IDF, indirect fire? Because you could hear it. I mean, it was shaking, windows were breaking. And I said, yeah. And then I hear it on his end. He's in Bakhmut, 2 hours away from me, which Bakhmut at that time was, I think, didn't go every 40 seconds it was getting bombed.
Yeah, the city would get hit with some sort of rocket every 43 seconds.
And so I'm on the radio with him, and I hear the same things happening with him. So they were both 2.5 hours away from each other in 2 different cities, getting hit by indirect fire at the same time. And he's having to lead his team out, and me and Seaspray are following the Ukrainians out. To have that kind of scenario for a father or son is, one and a wish on anyone. Yeah,
I can't imagine.
Yeah.
What's the end game in Ukraine? I mean, because I don't hear one coming from this White House.
Well, no. I mean,
I have a feeling if we have a change of administration, it'll be over before the inauguration's done.
That's what President Trump said. And you know what's really interesting about President Trump saying that? He said if he gets as president-elect, he'll end it. And before he said that, I had already wrote in that book before he said that, maybe a year before he said that this thing can be over in 24 hours. And the reason, and I believe that, that's not to be saying anything because I don't like Joe Biden. I believe that. I believe that this thing can be over in 24 hours. All that has to happen is a strong leader in the White House called a humanitarian ceasefire based on the fact that there are war crimes. I personally have attested to war crimes there. I've been on Fox News showing video evidence of war crimes there. There are war crimes. Not saying that we bring in U.S. American troops and NATO troops to fight the Russians. Just, hey, humanitarian ceasefire, war crimes have been committed. These people need to be tended to. And once you have NATO troops inside Ukraine, there's Article 5 violations at risk. There'll be a line that would be drawn in the sand somewhere about Putin, and it'll be over. But one of the interesting things about President Trump saying that in the debate was that Putin responded right away. And Putin said, I heard President Trump saying that he wants to end this thing. I don't know his policies, but we're interested in hearing him, and we'd like to see what President Trump has to say so we can end this. The other side in Ukraine spoke against it. Why do you have the White House and in Ukraine leadership speaking against peace? Why is there no talk of peace? Only talk there has been about more money. And all that money, those hundreds of billions of dollars, over $200 billion now, that's going to Ukraine, is a lot of it's making a U-turn and come right back because there's no congressional oversight over that money. We've had to risk our life to drive tourniquets to the front line because these troops don't have tourniquets. If you send hundreds of billions of dollars, why can't they have a tourniquet? Why do we have to bring people to teach them how to use a tourniquet? Now, there's a lot of rockets getting used. We're sending Javelin missiles and those things are getting used. Why are they getting used? Because they can't put that in their pocket, the cash in their pocket. But what they can do is once they shoot, every Javelin missile they shoot, then the neocons in Washington, D.C. and the warmongers there and the military industrial complex is making billions of dollars. They need this war to make billions of dollars. So that's why you don't hear any talk of peace. And so when you have someone to go in the White House that doesn't need to make money off of this, his friends don't need to make money off of this, just to be blunt, they're not corrupted, then there can be talks of peace. And President Trump, in my opinion, has nothing to gain. He doesn't have a financial incentive. He doesn't care about financial incentives for his friends that are part of the military industrial complex. And so all his incentive is exactly what he said on the debate stage. I want people to stop dying. And for me, I want people to stop dying. I've seen the pizza parlors. This isn't a third world country, by the way. This is a first world country like where we live. Pizza parlors, ice cream shops, schools, apartment buildings that women and children only live in. No military targets. Elderly neighborhoods to the rubble to the ground. I want people to stop dying, and that's what President Trump wants. And it can be over in 24 hours with the right leader.
Well, I know it's a bit back in time, but it reminds me a little bit of the Iranian hostage crisis. Mm-hmm. You know, Iran took our embassy and held those hostages for over a year. You're too young, but I'm an old guy. And Jimmy Carter was president, you know, and there was no way to resolve it. And Reagan gets elected, and they released him on Inauguration Day before he got to the White House.
Yeah.
And I heard somebody that worked in his administration said the Iranians believed that he would launch the missiles as soon as he got to the White House, and they wanted those hostages out.
Yeah.
I mean, leadership does make a difference.
It makes a difference. It's a huge difference. I mean, you're hearing people around the world right now talking. If President Trump, you're hearing world leaders already starting to respond because, you know, they think there's probably a pretty good chance that he's going to get in office. I mean,
I was in Israel a few weeks ago, and I was talking to somebody there that's a part of their military, and they said the Taliban is stronger than they've ever been since we left, with the armaments we left, and they've had such a free.
Well, we're giving them between $50 and $80 million a week. Our taxpayer dollars are giving the Taliban between $50 and $80 million a week. So if you're worried about taxpayer money going to Ukraine, like what's worse than that is the fact that we're funding the Taliban, who are using that money for power and control, starving the Afghan people, sexually enslaving the women, and building their terrorist network, which is against their Doha agreement that they signed, which should be null and void from the beginning. But they're building their terrorist network to reportedly have another 9/11 attack. I don't know if you know, we could really get off topic in this, but there's a guy named Ahmad Massoud, who was the leader. The historical piece was Ahmad Massoud was the leader of the Northern Alliance before 9/11. And he was like the rival of the Taliban. He had warned the U.S. of a pending attack, 9/11. They ignored it, and the Twin Towers fell, and we were thrust in 20 years of war. Bin Laden, brilliantly before 9/11, assassinated Massoud 2 days before, sent some journalists in. They had a bomb in the camera. They killed him. The reason they killed him is because they knew he would be our ally post 9/11. Fast forward 20 years, the withdrawal takes place. His son, Ahmad Massoud, Jr. is now leading the resistance in Afghanistan. A lot of the last part of Saving Aziz, a lot of the women and children were getting out. We were in coordination with his team. All of our former commandos and allies we left behind are working under his leadership. Any rational person would look at the last 20 years and say he's our ally, not the Taliban. The White House, in the White House State Department, Secretary Blinken has blacklisted Ahmad Massoud from coming to the United States to report a pending attack on the United States right now that's being funded through that $50 to $80 million we're sending a week. I'm saying 50 to 80 million because we can't find out exactly what it is. I just know it's. So he's wanting to report it. So right now, myself and Sean Ryan, I don't know if you know who she is. He's local here. We're doing a petition. I think we have like 300,000 signatures on it right now for the State Department to lift that ban. So we have Congress involved too, so that Congress will allow Ahmad Massoud to be heard, even if he's full of it. We at least want to hear what he has to say. He's talking about threats, another 9/11 threat. We have Secretary Chris Miller, Secretary of Defense's signature on it. We have tons of Congress people. Like Secretary Blinken needs to lift this restriction off of Ahmad Massoud so they can hear what he has to say.
Well, if we don't let people speak in Congress that are full of baloney, there won't be any words in Congress.
Those seats will be empty.
I used a polite version. That's awful. I want to change directions just a little bit. I've read some numbers around. We have a problem with masculinity or the lack thereof. And one of the places I think it's verifiable statistically is with the military. People aren't raising their hand to serve. I think what I read was only the Marines and Space Force are meeting their thresholds for recruitment.
Yeah, that's accurate, but those are based on skewed numbers. And I hate to say that because I love the military. I'm a patriot. I love this country. I'm probably
there's
the most patriotic guy I know.
There's some evidence to support that.
But there's evidence to support it. And if I do love this country as much as I say I do, then I need to point out our problems. And we're fudging those numbers to say that we were meeting recruiting goals, and we're not meeting recruiting goals.
Even the Marines. No one is. I mean, they're when I say they're fudging their numbers, they're cutting back units, they're reducing size. Because of the shortage of recruiting. So because of that shortage, they're reducing the size, and as they reduce the size, they said the numbers aren't so bad. But we're probably at the lowest point of recruiting since Vietnam, and all estimates that I figured out is we're about 35% down in recruiting, and that's. It's worse than that even sounds, because the people they are recruiting, they've lowered standards, and so now you have young men going in the Marine Corps that show up at the Marine Corps that can't even do a pull-up. I mean, that's unfathomable to me. That you got these, and so it puts so much pressure on the recruiters. It puts so much pressure on the drill instructors. We're having to do, the suicide rate is higher than it was even at the beginning of the war on terror. It's actually the highest it's ever been now, because the leadership is under so much pressure of this, and it's just such a toxic environment. And it comes down to exactly what you said: this attack on masculinity. When you don't have when you have a culture that's not raising up young men, then you're going to have a military that doesn't have the qualified candidates or willing candidates to be the men that this country needs to defend it. And then you're going to have a national security crisis. And so this isn't a recruiting problem. This is a national security crisis because not only are they struggling, I mean, the special operations communities or hanging on, doing a good job. But what they had to do to do a good job is before this year-long, like for my job as a reconnaissance Marine, it's about a year-long pipeline. They've had to open up a year-long program ahead of time to get kids ready for it, because even kids that show up that are in shape, their bodies just aren't physically capable of doing that training. So you have to prep some of these kids for like a year to get their body in shape just to be able to do your training. And so that's how the special operations communities are trying to hang on. And it is a very serious problem, Pastor Allen. And again, it's not just a culture and recruiting problem. It's a national security problem. Well, it's a national family problem. When the families fail, our nation is not secure. And we've believed so much of this social engineering garbage, and accepted the lies coming from a secular culture and rejected our biblical worldview. God defined marriage. The government doesn't. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure my Bible says God created us male and female. He didn't create 14 categories. No. And we've been embarrassed, those of us that say we're Christians, to own this biblical worldview. And it's making our children and our grandchildren incredibly vulnerable in some very practical ways. And while we think we're being tolerant or kind, or we're being coached to embrace DEI, which I happen to think is ungodly, we are weakening not only our churches and our homes and our communities, but we're making the whole nation more vulnerable. Godliness is actually a strength to a nation. I mean, that seems so simple to say it out loud. You almost feel like you need to apologize. But we need healthy churches and godly men and godly families and people willing to take that biblical worldview and stand against the insanity that our culture is pumping out these days.
Well, the problem lies in this, especially when you talk about culture and politics, which I know is the kind of theme of everything you're discussing lately, is we're looking at Washington, D.C. to solve the problem. And I believe everyone should vote. I mean, every warrior since 1775 has fought, bled, died for this country has been so you could get out there and freely vote. So I believe that especially Christians, need to go and vote biblically. However, the problems that we're going to face in America are not going to be solved in Washington, D.C. As much as I think President Trump's the right president, it's not going to be solely solved by President Trump and his administration. Where the problems in America will be solved is in people's homes and their communities and their churches. And so we can't just look to D.C. We have to start in our own homes. And me included, by the way. Like
your point is so spot on. Whichever side of the political aisle you stand on, in the last 8 years, your candidate has been in the White House.
Yeah.
And look where we are. We're $35 trillion in debt. We're mired in these wars that are inexplicable, whether it was Afghanistan or Ukraine. Mm-hmm. The fabric of our families is unraveling. Our educational outputs are abysmal. Our economy is in shambles. Inflation is double digits. And, if you're a supporter of Mr. Trump, I pray we're fortunate enough that he goes back to the White House. Mm-hmm. But we've elected him once. It didn't fix our problems. By the time he was out of the White House 90 days, we're back in the same mess we were in before. We're nuts if we think another trip to the White House is going to fix us. His policies might help us, but we have to have a heart change. And if you don't like Trump and you think the current administration is the solution, we still need a heart change because our nation is in the deep weeds. If the church doesn't step forward and be the church, there is no political solution out of this morass that we find ourselves in.
Yeah, I do. I've said this as people allow me in the pulpit, and I'll say it here. I said it on Focus on the Family. The problem isn't Washington, D.C. They're part of the problem. The problem isn't these corrupt politicians. The problem is us. And when I say us, I'm speaking to the church. If Christians would just be who they say to be, who they claim to be, vote biblically, and live biblically, and starting in their home and their communities and churches. If Christians would just be who they claim to be as Christians, then our country would be in the position it's in.
What I think is unfortunate is most of us have this temptation. We want somebody to go to Washington and fix this mess. Mm-hmm. Whoever it is, we want them to go do this, have the courage to go stand up. But the reality is we have to have that courage at home. If we won't take this message to our kitchen table and to our holiday table and to the school boards in our community, if we can't get pornography out of the schools and the towns where we live, mm-hmm. It's unfair to think somebody should go to Washington and fight the swamp.
Yeah,
we got to have the courage to say, you get that garbage out of our schools, or we'll see to it you never exercise any authority in this community again.
Yes.
It's awful.
Yeah, we got to take the communities back. Yeah. We have to take the communities back, and the church should be standing up, and that's why I'm so in line with you and in lockstep with our mutual friend Eric Metaxas. We've seen this happen before, right? You read a history book. We've seen this happen in Germany when the churches, 3,000 churches were for the Nazis. 3,000 churches were openly in opposition to it, but 12,000 churches were silent on it because they didn't want to get political, and look what it caused.
Well, when the church fails, suffering goes up exponentially. And we can track that through history far beyond even Europe between the two world wars.
Yeah.
At the end of the Roman Empire becomes Christian 4th century with Constantine. And as the Roman Empire is unraveling both in Rome and then in Constantinople, when that collapses, the world's, at least Western Europe steps into the Dark Ages. And we can point to multiple places, certainly between the world wars, when the church in Europe failed, the ashes of the Holocaust rained down on us. And I think we're standing at another one of those inflection points in history. If the church doesn't get this right, I think the ashes of destruction are going to rain down on us again. It's more than going to church and being polite and hearing sermons and, don't smoke, drink, or chew, or have friends who do.
Yeah.
We got to engage the world we live in with God's truth. And that's intense stuff. It got Jesus tortured to death. And most of his close friends died a martyr's death, not because they were advocating for political candidates, but because they were challenging the political structure of their day with a biblical worldview. Mm-hmm. And we're going to have the courage to say there's a God and he can be known. And yes, we want to worship in our churches, but we want to live this out in our schools, in our hospitals, in our courtrooms, and in the military. Mm-hmm. I believe we can do it. Let's change topics. I got just a couple of minutes before we have to go.
Yeah.
On a very slopey roof in a very hot building, someone almost assassinated Mr. Trump.
Yeah.
And they want us to believe that there was just some momentary glitch in security. That seems impossible to me.
And to me too. And not only to me, and this is in my opinion, by the way, I've been around the military for 30 years now. I spent 14 years in special operations. I was also, a lot of people, I don't talk about this a lot, but I worked for the U.S. State Department as I was the senior program manager for the surveillance detection program, which means my job was to train people around the world to do these assessments, do security vulnerability assessments for ambassadors, RSOs, in the most dangerous parts of the world.
So you're entitled to an opinion.
I'm entitled to an opinion.
One.
Yeah, this is a professional assessment more than opinion.
Okay.
You do not allow anyone to be on a vantage point like that like on that rooftop, 136 yards away on an elevated roof with a clear vantage point to the president, who was a president of the United States and a front-running candidate for the 2024 election. Probably one of the most important people on the planet, and also one of the highest risk people on the planet. And you have a building with an elevated roof, a sloped roof, which by the way is cover concealment, 136 yards away. You don't do a SVA, security vulnerability assessment, and let that pass. That just doesn't happen. The Secret Service is supposed to be the best in the world at this. There is no way, in my professional opinion, that Crooks got on that roof unless he was allowed to. And now, I won't speculate if it was a complicity on an individual, to the Secret Service, to the CIA, to Deep State. The entire government was against trying to assassinate president. I don't know that, but I can tell you that he did not do that without some kind of complicity from someone within inside the U.S. government. It didn't happen. The Secret Service had a scheduled meeting with the local law enforcement and the counter snipers. That meeting was canceled right before it occurred. They never spoke to the counter snipers or the local law enforcement until after President Trump was shot. Now, I always want to make sure people know President Trump was shot. He wasn't. They didn't shoot at him. It wasn't. This guy shot the president in the face. That happened, and I think people
for the hand of God.
The hand of God protected him, because that bullet was coming here. He moved his head and it caught his ear. When that trigger was pulled, those crosshairs was on his head for a kill shot. Not only did they not have that meeting, there was no communication between those elements. So when you're doing something like this, you have multiple entities, whether it's combat, whether it's local law enforcement is going to arrest somebody, a crack dealer in a neighborhood. If there's multiple agencies, they're all going to be in the same comms so they can talk to each other for safety, for success. The local law enforcement, the snipers, and the Secret Service did not have a one network of comms. They had no way to communicate with each other. That's not a mistake to do something like that. That just doesn't happen. The team that was there is like not even a B team. It was a Z team. Like they were terrible. They were people that were augmentees. They were not the people that President Trump's detail was asking for. They were asking for more people. They were being denied support.
Well, they couldn't get their gun in their holster after the fact. I mean,
look, like I'll pick on this lady publicly because I think she deserves it because of what happened. But she's like 5'2", overweight. I'm 5'4". I've had 14 years of special operations. If they wanted to put me on the stage with President Trump's detail, I would say I'm not qualified to do that. He's the president's 6 foot tall. I need to be able to shield him with my body. I'm not the best candidate for that. And whoever put that detail together, and then President Trump has complimented them for getting him off. He should compliment them. So for him, I'll tell you, they did not do a good job. When he was raising his hand, and I love that moment, by the way, with the picture and raise his hand saying fight, that should have never happened. Because he's not in charge anymore. He's not President Trump. He's my principal, and I'm getting him off the X. I'm moving him. Like I'm getting my shoes. You're not getting anything. You're getting dragged off the stage as fast as humanly possible to get you safety. You're not getting your photograph moment right now. That's what the Secret Service is supposed to do. They did not do a good job to get him off that stage. They had worst people they could possibly have to do that. This guy was at 4:26 p.m. He shows up on site. He's identified at 4:26 p.m. I don't know when he got there, but that's when he was actually identified. And the first shot went off at 6:30. That's 2 hours and 4 minutes that he was there. They saw him shooting a little laser rangefinder. They saw him with a rifle. They saw him climbing on the roof. They saw him laying on a roof at 6:11. He's laying on a roof. 19 minutes before he shot, he's on the roof with a rifle, identified. And they let this take place. People, if this, Hunter said earlier, if this was a Lance Corporal in the Marine Corps, he'd be in prison right now. Like they don't need, this has been 2 weeks and they're still, Director Cheeto's like can't answer questions. Now this assistant director can't answer questions. They're blaming it on local law enforcement. They're responsible. And at some level, there's incompetence among some people, but at some level, I am certain, without a shadow of a doubt, there's complicity. And I hope and pray that Congress and the Senate get to the bottom of this and don't let up on this. I was really disturbed when I seen, I don't want to say some people that are put on a task force, but some people that are specifically left off the task force, like Congressman Corey Mills and Congressman Eli Crane, who was a Navy SEAL for 14 years. Congressman Mills has done over 1,000 assessments like this as a counter sniper for the State Department. Like, these people should be on that detail.
So they left the experts off the detail. They left
the experts off the detail, and
just accidentally.
And these two guys, by the way, while everybody else is in Washington, D.C., they went straight to the site, went on the site, did their own investigation, and started raising some major concerns like, hey, this isn't right. Where's the drone footage? There's no drone footage. Where's the communication recordings? There's communication recordings, certainly. No. Okay, Director Cheeto said, we didn't put anyone on the roof because it was sloped, which is laughable. Like you said, I guess she doesn't have Christmas lights, right? But she said, but we did have 3 guys inside the building. Not true. One of the guys left early for some unknown reason. He left early. The other 2 guys, their key card wouldn't let them in the building, so they were locked out of the building. So there's no one in the building, no one on top of the building. When you do a vulnerability assessment like that, you say, this is the vulnerable spot, 136 yards away. We're not in this situation. It's not 20 buildings. It's one building. We're going to put people on the roof. She put people in the building, but they wasn't there. This sounds like the Jeffrey Epstein cell. I don't want to sound like a tin hat person, but it sounds like the Jeffrey Epstein cell to me. No communications, no video. The guards were gone. The officers wasn't in the building. Like, no evidence again. And it's
what I've been encouraging people to do for a while now is to watch, listen, think, and then act. Mm-hmm. And we need to pay attention.
Yeah.
If what they're telling you doesn't line up with what you see, you have to trust what you see and what you think and what you hear. That's called situational awareness, I think. That's your world, not mine. But
if it was incompetence, then shut down the CIA, shut down the Secret Service tomorrow and get some competent people. Because, I mean, first of all, Director Cheeto had this DEI hire, which is, I mean, you're talking about DEI. If anybody's, look who we have running for president. If you want to talk about DEI nightmare, much less the Secret Service. But her goal, first of all, she left Pepsi to come over and be in charge of the Secret Service because she was friends with the Bidens. And then she had a 30 by 30. I don't know if you heard this. She wanted to hire 30% of the Secret Service as women by 2030, but only 5% of the applicants for the Secret Service or women. So now you have to go find the other 25% by going and find people that don't even want to do the job just so they can reach this number. The DI thing's a nightmare. I mean, airline industry, like, how about the best person, most qualified person to fly the plane safely? Can we start there?
If I'm getting on the plane, I
don't care what color you are. I don't care if you're lime green or you're male or female. It doesn't matter to me as long as you can fly the plane safely. But I mean, and then you got, like I said, with the DEI thing, you got, Kamala running.
And this isn't political. This is for all of our well-being. If they'll make those choices that put Trump or anybody else at risk, they'll make choices that put us at risk to maintain their quotas or their formulas. Yeah. This gets really personal in a hurry. We don't want those quotas in our airplanes. We don't want them in our schools.
No.
We don't want them in our courtrooms or our surgical suites.
Or the leader of the free world. And by the way, like I say that because I'm kind of hot on it right now because they're pushing the main campaign point is that Kamala's a black female, but actually she's not. She's Indian, and she ran as the first Indian senator. And I mean, there's like tons of evidence out there where she's proud of her Indian heritage and her Indian family, but all of a sudden now she's black. Like, to all my black friends out there, like, can you please like call this out because this is the wool shouldn't be pulled over everybody's eyes. How about just being American? How about just run for the president of the United States, just being a good human?
Based on your qualifications, that you're prepared to lead us to a better place in the future.
I don't care what color you are.
All right. My guests today are Chad and Hunter Robichaux. Their book is A Mission Without Borders: Why a Father and Son Risk It All for the People of Ukraine. Where can they get the book?
Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere books are sold. And I think you guys are going to have some in your bookstore for those.
We'll have them here on campus for those that want them that way.
Something really cool we did here is because Saving Aziz, a lot of people asked for pictures. And so Thomas Nelson let us put a link in the back of the book. I'm going to have a lot of pictures. So you're not getting like 5 pictures like getting a book. We're going to have a lot of pictures and videos.
That's cool.
So
you've also got a podcast you're doing.
I do.
Where can people find that?
It's called The Resilient Show. And you're going to be an upcoming guest on it. We've had great guests. We've had Sean Ryan. We've had Terry Crews on it. We've got Kaylee McEnany coming up. Yourself, Eric Metaxas. Great guest. And talking about a lot of the same things you're talking about, just resiliency and culture and life. And with some amazing, amazing human beings. So anywhere you listen to your podcast, The Resilient Show, and you can follow us on Instagram as well.
All right. Hunter, thank you for being with us.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Welcome to Tennessee.
I appreciate it.
Once you're here, you're part of the family. Now we got to get you back, okay?
That's right. Yes, sir.
And if you're listening to this and you hear what Chad and Hunter are talking about, I think sometimes we feel powerless or hopeless, maybe, and you're not. We're citizens of a kingdom that transcends any nation or any government. And we have an assignment biblically to pray for those who have authority over us. And that's not just praying for the candidates you like. That's praying for whoever God has put in authority over us. And we have to do that on a daily basis. My prayer isn't just that Mr. Trump would be protected, but that everybody running for office in this nation would be protected. I did an interview with Robert Kennedy Jr. And for months and months until this assassination attempt, they denied him Secret Service protection. And his father and his uncle were murdered by assassins. Yeah. We don't want anybody at risk. So your prayers make a difference. You're not powerless. You're not hopeless. If we will use the spiritual authority we have, we will see the changes and the difference made in the political authority around us. If we continue to abdicate our spiritual authority, politicians aren't going to fix our problems. So we're going to keep talking about culture and Christianity because we believe Christianity should change our culture. Thank you for your time today, and thank you guys for being here.
Thank you, Pastor Allen.
Hey, thanks for joining me today. Before you go, please like the podcast and leave a comment so more people can hear about this topic too. If you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe to Alan Jackson Ministries YouTube channel and follow the Culture and Christianity podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcast. Together, let's learn how to lead with our faith and change our culture. I'll see you next time.